Hello everybody, the Nameless Narcissist here once again, a simple man diagnosed with NPD, giving you the facts on narcissistic personality disorder and the things that go on in my head. If you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe, but keep in mind, I am no clinician. I can only speak to my own experiences and stuff I read. So I was thinking today about how hard it is to pin down what the core issue in pathological narcissism is, just because of how complex personality disorders are, right? The degree of genetic and environmental factors that can play into that, like how many core schemas you can have or core beliefs, what all can lead to a defensive structure that resembles this construct that we basically made out of thin air, right? Now, don't get me wrong, I do think that it's a more or less stable construct if you're not looking at the external behaviors, right? I talk to narcissists sometimes and I'll be like blown away by how similar we are. It's just like, and that's kind of why sometimes I lean more towards a categorical model, just because of how similar it can be. It gets crazy. But anyways, so I decided to do a little, thought experiment to kind of test to see if I could find something that I felt like was genuinely the core of narcissistic personality disorder. And my thought was, well, one, let's compare them to all other personality disorders and see what is left, right? What is the thing that makes it unique? But then I had another thought. Would the thing that makes it unique be the core of it? You know what I mean? Like, you've heard me talk about, like, oh, I think narcissism is BPD with a grandiose shell. Or as Kirk Honda puts it, and I made a post about it on Reddit recently, like, how do I put it? That people who are narcissists are just as borderline as borderlines. Narcissists just deal with it in narcissistic ways, right? So the narcissism makes narcissists, using that model, unique. However, it's not the core. The core is still borderline issues. So I thought that that's probably a flawed way of thinking, to think that it's the thing that makes it unique. And so then I decided to take it to the opposite logical conclusion, which, you know, black and white thinking, of course. And what do all the personality disorders have in common? Because like, this is a construct of pathological issues all under the same umbrella that are distinct from most other disorders, right? I mean, hell, there used to be, like, the DSM used to be divided into Axis 1 and Axis 2 to distinguish the fact of how different these disorders are, right? Despite that, personality disorders make up like 10% of the population. So I decided that I'm going to instead try to find the one thing that is similar across all of these disorders. I'm going to start with NPD, what I feel like the core of that would be, and then kind of branch out from there and be like, oh, what's does that have in common with borderline? What's that in common with the rest of the cluster A, cluster C, whatever. So with NPD, I think the core issue, so to speak, is going to be self-esteem regulation, right? That's basically the thing that I'm battling against all the time. And there's other issues that and then of course there are other issues though that lead to the struggle with self-esteem, like internal feelings of worthlessness, feeling like I am unlovable, feeling like the only way to earn love is through achievement, is through proving people that I'm amazing. That's the only way I'll ever get love, right? So I think that's pretty cut and dry. But then let's go on to NPD and BPD. What do those have in common? I think they have the innate sense of worthlessness in common, although with narcissism it's usually a little bit more well defended. I would say that they both have intense fear of abandonment. I will die on a hill saying that. And I would also say they both, feelings of emptiness too. I think that one's pretty common. And then also weird study I was reading, apparently people with NPD are also high at risk for self-mutilation, which makes me feel a lot better. Don't read into that. But yeah, I guess with the, there's a couple of very deep similarities, and I know when I talk to people with borderline, like, I end up relating to them a lot. And I think that they're very similar in that way. And I guess we could say that core feeling of being unlovable or worthless, and what other underlying that means. Then I want to expand it to all of cluster B. What does all of cluster B have in common? Obviously, it's the dramatic, erratic, and emotional cluster, but that's looking at external behaviors. I am not interested in external behaviors. I want to look at the internal experience. And this one gets hard, because NPD and BPD, pretty similar, but think of ASPD, like sociopathy, whatever, and histrionic personality disorder. Those are those in my mind seem completely different, other than tendency towards anger and stuff like that. And it took me a while to even come up with anything when I was thinking about this, and the only thing that really stood out was this belief that the world is hostile, that the world is a bad place to be in, and it's dangerous, and you need to be prepared to basically bite back at any instance. Because when cluster Bs hurt people, it's usually reactive. Don't get me wrong, there are people that do it proactively, but those people probably have a whole cocktail of pathological issues going on, not just cluster B stuff. Even if that is the predominant issue, is cluster B stuff. But then I was but paranoid personality disorder would, it's pretty easy to see how they would have that in common, right? And the only reason I didn't really take it out because of, decide that there's some other thing for cluster B is because I'm pretty sure they're taking out paranoid personality disorder, and I don't really know enough about it to really say the similarities. I did hear once lecturer say that he thinks that paranoid should be in the cluster B, but I don't like paranoid. Stay in your own cluster. I'm joking. All right, now cluster A. What does all of cluster A have in common? So, what does cluster A have in common? This one's really hard for me because I have no fucking clue, if I'm being honest. It's made up of schizoid, schizotypal, and paranoid. I have no idea about paranoid personality disorder. I don't know if anybody does because they're very reclusive. They think everybody's out to get them and stuff like that. Very, 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 very paranoid. Schizoids are interesting because they kind of view themselves as separate from society and have this very intellectualized thinking. Very analytic, very self-reflective. They are very indifferent towards other people. And then there's schizotypal, which honestly I know less of. At least I know one schizoid person, in real life. Schizotypal, they're just... I don't want to use the only word that comes to mind. They're just they're eccentric, I would say. They have this way of thinking that's very unique, and wouldn't be a way that people look up Hinzog on YouTube. I love his content. He has schizotypal, and he does a way better job of describing this stuff than I ever could. But honestly, I think the common denominator there is feeling the word that they usually use is alien at least in schizoid. I'm not sure about schizotypal. Feeling they are separate from everybody else, in a different way than me, where I'm I feel it's more, I feel like everybody else is different, I guess, and they feel like they are different. They feel like they're separated from society, they just aren't parts. It's a really weird way to describe it. I guess it's less that they're different from other people and more that they're different from society. If any schizoids want to chime in and correct me on this, but I do think that'd be a pretty good common denominator for cluster A, feeling disincluded, which the fact that it doesn't bother them might be a indicator that is more of a defense mechanism than anything, right? They feel alienated from society, so they kind of take that power back and say, no, I'm alienating myself from society for whatever trauma response that might be a part of. Or maybe they were just so hurt by society where they were well, I don't need it anyway. Then there's cluster C, the anxious cluster, and fearful. It includes obsessive compulsive personality disorder, distinct from obsessive compulsive disorder, by the way. Obsessive compulsive personality disorder is people who get their self-worth from work, they become fixated on it. They might be late for deadlines because they need to perfect a certain thing. Let's say they need to turn in a paper. They might spend so much time trying to perfect the paper that they'll be late to turn it in, right? They're also very preoccupied with order and control. Then there's dependent personality disorder, where they basically need somebody else to make every single decision for them. They can't make any, down to and a romantic partner, right? Down to deciding what clothes they should wear. It's insane. And then there's avoidant, which is similar to schizoid in a way, just a very different internal landscape. They want to socialize with people. Like, schizoids are indifferent towards people. They don't give a fuck. Avoidant people, they really want relationships, right? Avoidant personality disorder. They want relationships. They want to see people, but they're so afraid of being judged and people hating them that they refuse to. Like, they will avoid social situations because they're so afraid of being judged, which I find fascinating. Because there's a big shame component on that, right? And that ties into NPD really well. And I would love to learn more about it, but weirdly enough, people who are terrified of being judged aren't really making too many YouTube videos or giving their personal accounts. But I think cluster C, the biggest common denominator is safety. They want to feel secure and safe, and like something, feel in control, or give that control to somebody else to make them not feel so anxious and stuff like that. I mean, I can see why it's called the anxious cluster. I do think it's something I'm having a hard time, because like OCPD, to feel safe, they need to control their environment, right? With dependent, to feel safe, they need to basically completely give themselves up to somebody else because they don't trust themselves to feel safe. And then with avoidant, it's to feel safe, they have to avoid other people. They feel like that people aren't going to like them, they're going to be mean to them, or whatever. But yeah, that's cluster. And now, let's bring it all together. Cluster A, the ABCs of the clusters, what do they all have in common? And that answer, honestly, I think I had before I even started this video. If you go on the Wikipedia for personality disorders, one of the first things it says is, one of the common things is all of them have identity disturbances. I read a couple studies on this too. So let's go down the list. Schizoid, they view themselves as other, I think, and like separate from society. Like my friend describes it as being an alien. They feel like he's an alien, an outsider, stuff like that. Schizotypal, to my I know nothing about paranoid. Schizotypal does something similar in my mind. Narcissistic personality disorder, we don't feel real. We don't feel like we're actual people. We feel like we're faking everything. We feel like shells. People with borderline, they just don't even have an identity. It's just splintered all over the place. Histrionic and antisocial, I'm not as sure about, but I think I think antisocial is more about like their worth is like their ability to gain respect or something. I read there's a better description of it in the DSM-5 section 3 alternative criteria, but I don't remember it. And histrionic, I'm not sure if they have identity disturbance, if I'm being honest. So far, I'm really not doing a great job at describing this. But then you can go to OCPD. All of their self-worth, their identity is based in their work, in how they're doing things, how good they're performing at their job. Then you can go to dependent. Their identity is purely that relationship, is purely the person who's making all the decisions for them. You can say that their identity is that person because that person is making every decision about them. And then you can go to avoidant, who their identity disturbance is thinking that they are unlovable, that nobody could like them, that nobody could ever even put up with their presence. Every personality disorder, to some degree, has identity disturbance in my mind. And that gets you thinking. It's like, why? You know? It's like, why would anybody, like, what causes identity disturbance? Which is an interesting question, and I think the key to it, I read in The Body Keeps the Score, is that what it's called? The Dutch dude wrote it. It's about PTSD, and he basically studied a bunch of these Vietnam vets coming back from, Vietnam, as they're coming back, and the effect that war had on them, and the PTSD from it. And it was super interesting reading about it, because there's so much overlap with personality disorders in certain ways. Just basic trauma responses, obviously, like being sensitive to noise and certain triggers, senses of being despondent and suicidality, whatever. But there was one that really stuck out to me, that's ingrained in my mind, where he said that a very common feeling these soldiers had is that they wish they could be the person they were before they felt like they were a different person now. They felt like whoever they were died. And think about the implications of that. Is that their entire personality is gone, or was gone. And now imagine somebody with a personality disorder. Personality disorders are usually brought up by kids who getting abused. And what are we supposed to be reminiscing about if we never even had the chance to make a personality? Our trauma basically killed any possibility of us having a real personality, and so our personality is just a bunch of maladaptive defense mechanisms. People with personality disorders are just children who never got a chance to be real people, I guess. I honestly think that CPTSD, like, personality disorders are just advanced forms of CPTSD that come from early childhood. That's always been my theory, honestly. But, you know. Anyways, that's it for this video. Hope you all enjoyed. Hopefully it was, or that was insightful. If you like this video, please like, comment, subscribe, whatever. Take your fucking meds, please.